Would you like to learn about AI model building in generative AI architectures? If so, this video is for you. Hi, my name is Mike Gibbs, and I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers. I've been an IT architect, like an enterprise architect and a network architect, for over 25 years. I am joined here with David Linthicum, who's been an architect for over 30 years. He's an expert on cloud architecture and generative AI architecture and quite a few things actually in the tech space. Today, David and I are going to talk about generative AI, specifically in the world of AI model building. David, would you like to say hello and say a few words?
Hey, everybody. This is an important topic. Your ability to build the right AI model from the right training data is ultimately a determination of your success of generative AI systems. So it's all interrelated one to another. This is a core function of generative AI. And as an architect, you need to understand how it works.
Sounds great. And thank you so much, David. So, David, could you at a high level talk about what AI model building actually is?
Yeah, it's the ability to take training data, the ability to learn from the data, and the ability to build a representation of the data into a knowledge model. In generative AI, those are going to be LLMs, but certainly machine learning does the same thing, deep learning does the same thing, traditional AI does the same thing. So the idea is that we take massive amounts of data, which we consider training data, and it's going to be absorbed and processed. And we determine how that processing is going to occur. And then through that data, we're able to build a model. And the model is going to be, depending on the AI toolkit you leverage, a representation of what that data actually means and the patterns that it's able to find within the data. So that's why we can take huge amounts of anomalous data that's out on the open internet. And that's kind of what ChatGPT is. And your ability to build a huge knowledge model, in this case, the LLMs, which are going to be a representation of the data that's out there, but put into a format that we can use by an inference engine to find and make conclusions within that model. So in other words, once we build it, we can ask it questions. In other words, what's write a bio for Mike Gibbs, and the ability to go out there and find everything with Mike Gibbs in, and the ability to say, okay, we want to write into a bio, and the ability to output it in the bio space. What's occurred there is that they found you out on the web someplace, ChatGPT. They put you into the model, your information, as long as everybody else information on the open internet, and they'll be able to, using an inference engine, find details about you and pattern matchings about you, and then be able to generate whatever we ask it to do. It could write a song about you. It could draw a picture of you if there's enough images out there. They even look at a video representation of you. That's a great thing about generative AI, and that's why everybody's excited about it, just because the multiple formats and power that it has, it's able to take the information. But this is basically foundational for AI, because what we're doing is we're taking the training data and we're putting it into a format where it's acceptable to be used by an inference engine. So inference engines can't go out and look through millions of data pieces out there. It has to look through a model, and the ability to build these models and deploy these models and manage these models and test these models and rebuild these models and refine these models is really kind of a core part of any AI system, and certainly generative AI.
That's fantastic, David. Thank you for that. So could you give some things that, cloud architects, enterprise architects, and AI architects should think about AI models?
Yeah, as architects go, the nice thing is that a lot of this stuff is going to be carried out by whatever AI toolkit that we've decided to leverage. So the ability to build and deploy and manage and refine these models can occur any different ways based on the technology that usually the engineers pick. So what we need to determine when we build these things is understanding that we're mimicking the data that we're training from. So you think about it, at the end of the day, AI systems are really able to do queries and data representations really, really good. So instead of going to SQL and then typing the SQL to get the essence of the data, ask specific questions, we're able to determine more complex patterns out of the information. So the main thing we need to be concerned with as architects is that the information in the model is represented accurately from the training data that came into it. So you do that, you do model testing. So in other words, we look at certain aspects of the model to make sure that when we ask certain questions, it's able to respond in a way that's going to be consistent with the data that went into it. So it has a set of accuracy that goes into it. Also, the ability to look at these models to make sure they don't have ethical issues that need to be dealt with, like biases, things like that. In many cases, training data, it can generate biases that have to be identified and removed or tuned within the system. The ability to look at the uses of the applications and how it's going to leverage the model. You got to remember that we're not all building GPT. We're building usually generative AI systems that are used for a specific business purpose. So is it living up to that business purpose? Is it trained with the right data that's representing the business? Is it trained for the use cases that we're going to leverage it for? We're going to go through the model to determine, best logistics in doing supply chain routing or trucking applications or any number of systems, and it has to be able to apply itself to whatever we're asking that system to do. And if it's unable to do that, then we're not living up to the aspects of the application. So the core thinking should be, if I'm going to build this model out of the training data, is it getting the right data that needs to build the model? That's core thing. Architects really kind of look at that. What are the sources of the information? What does the information mean? And when it's accepted into the model, it's built within the model, is it representing that data in an accurate way? So in other words, when I do ask it to build Mike Gibbs bio, that it's actually representing you inaccurately information. For example, ChatGPT thinks that they still thinks I went to MIT, so there's a problem there. And if it doesn't, we're able to tune that model so it does represent the data, either reload the data or run processes in it so it's able to remove the erroneous data out of the system. And then the ability to refine the thing ongoing. So you got to remember, models in the world of generative AI are living things. We're going to go to the back-end systems, constantly update it with as much real-time information as needed to make the decisions. It's not going to help the business if it's making decisions based on the training that it received 2 years ago, which is, if you use ChatGPT, that's one of the limitations of the system. It's going to give you a knowledge representation at a certain degree of time. I think the cutoff was 2022. I think other versions are out there now. We can't do that within the business. It has to be constantly updated, constantly represented. So it's a living and breathing thing that is constantly being updated with the training data in it. We need to test it to make sure that it's representing the data accurately. Information that's coming out of it based on the questions that are coming in are accurate, and we're doing so by testing the system. We're watching for biases that could get us in trouble. Like I said, it's not when you're going to get sued for having a generative AI system. It's not if you're going to get sued, it's when. Just because they have a tendency to have biased representations, or people at least going to question them. And then your ability to refine the model and continuously update it with more current information, so it's able to make decisions, provide better customer experiences, better customer feedback, and do things that are vital to running a business. And the ability to have maintenance on maintenance records and maintenance for jet engines using generative AI systems, things like that. So it's probably conceptually the most complex thing that's part of a generative AI system. But as an architect, it's easy to understand, because either it does what you ask it to do or it doesn't. And we're not having to deal with the underlying technology. We're not going through the code. We're looking at the behavior of the system. So in other words, we know what questions to ask it. We know what representations have to be brought back. And if it gives us the wrong results, we know there's a problem with it. We have to go in there and retrain the data, or fix the data, or remove biases somehow. And the great thing about AI systems is lots of tools out there that are able to do this. We're able to find biases. We're able to find erroneous information. We're able to retest the data. We're able to look at performance characteristics. We're able to do tuning of the models. All these sorts of things come in there. So it is probably the most focused thing as architects that we deal with, because the training data, once you get that right, that's going to be consistent normally, unless someone's breaking your data somehow, or you have data hygiene problems that are occurring. Your ability to train the models and deploy the models, then that becomes the single point of the center of the universe with the generative AI system. And then we have to maintain it and update it and test it. And then it becomes the brain of the system, the inference engines will ask the questions, but it becomes the database of knowledge that it uses to bring these things up. So it's interesting, it's vital, it's always going to be different based on the tools that you have, and it's important as architects we know the core functionality of it, we know the behaviors are going to be desirable from it, but don't necessarily have to understand the underlying details because that's going to change depending on the AI tools that you leverage, and the toolkits build and deploy these models in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting, which is what I've been telling architects or people desire to be architects for a long time. When I tell most people as an architect they're going to design a solution and they're not going to build it, and they say, "What am I going to do next?" And I'm going to say they're going to either be solving another business problem or you're going to be assessing, diagnosing, looking at the implementation and seeing what worked and what didn't work, and then creating a new design or a better design to move forward. And I'm glad you really highlighted to this. This is a cycle. It's not like we build it once and let it go. It's constant evolution. We're constantly trying to optimize.
Yeah, and I think it is. There's lots of things to do as an architect. When an architect says, I'm running out of things to do because we're getting close to the completion of the system, that's not true. You have to deal with training. You have to deal with cultural
Yeah.
changes. You have to deal with hiring and firing. You have to deal with demand planning. You have to deal with operational guidance that goes along and making sure the technical resources are there to build those documents. And it's going to be an ongoing job that I guess is going to have an end depending on if you're working on a specific system, but it's not necessarily going to be the end that everybody thinks it's going to be.
No.
So you have to look at this as an all-inclusive position where we're dealing with everything from soup to nuts. We're dealing with the requirements of the business, defining the business models, defining the objectives of the generative AI system we're designing, defining what the metrics are for success, defining how to test the thing, how to get the data that we're asking for, the ability to build the understand and build the conceptual models of the data, the ability to look at the core functionality of the AI systems, turn that over to the AI engineers so they're picking the right technology, turn that over to the data scientists so they're leveraging the databases correctly, turn that over and provide the AI ethics specialists with the guidance that they need to make sure we're not introducing things in the knowledge model that's going to get us in trouble. And then all the way through to the training and the deployment and the cultural changes and the ability to have the accept the fact that this system is coming and it's going to have a role within the organization. People understand what that role is going to be, and they also understand how to bring the value back to the business. And if all those things aren't done, that's where the failure starts to occur. We just think we can design something and throw it over the wall and hope for the best. That's not what architects do. It's everything and anything as it comes to making success. Even becoming the evangelist for the system within the company, the ability to explain to lots of different people, the ability to deal with the board of directors, the ability to deal with a lot of the vendors who will be picked from the engineers. They have to have negotiations and things like that when those things occur from a very high level. And it becomes systemic to everything that is soup to nuts in building these systems. And I think the issue out there is people take the architecture role and they define it as a very narrow thing.
Yeah.
And it's not a narrow thing. And I think the problem is I think a lot of architectural classes out there that I see define it as a narrow thing. And you got to have someone who's filling in those pieces on the both ends. And if you don't, you're not going to be successful. So you should find lots of things to do as an architect. And I always tell people who work for me, if you're running out of things to do, come see me. I guarantee I can list 10.
Yeah. You're never bored. It's a great job and I love it. But, I'm glad we talked about that. So in addition to talking about AI and generative AI architectures and AI model building, we did a little bit about what does an architect actually do, because that's one of the most confused things that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, the model building becomes probably the easiest thing to do if you get the data right and the testing right, things like that. So I don't worry about that. I worry about the data more so than the model. But you need to understand conceptually what it is and how to ask the questions and how to make sure it's being tested correctly. And what we're doing is basically managing a bunch of engineers and a bunch of testing engineers and data scientists to make sure that they're doing the right things to take the appropriate steps to build the correct model in the correct state that's operating in the correct function so we can understand the business. And we're also representing the business. In other words, we're asking the questions to the model. We're making sure we're getting the right results back. We're looking at the objectives of the business, how it relates to building this generative AI system and deploying this generative AI system, and figuring out what success looks like, and the ability to define success within the team, meaning the AI ethics specialists, the engineers, data scientists, things like that, and the ability to push them in the right path so they're making the right decisions in terms of the technology and how they're leveraging the technology. But building a model becomes probably the easiest thing to do just because the technology is so good. Understanding where the data is coming from is going to be the harder part, the data structure, understanding how to test that model, how to sell that model internally, how to hire the appropriate AI engineers to build the model correctly is going to be a tougher roll to hoe. But the technology is at a point right now, it's all different, but it works pretty well. As long as it's in the hands of engineers that know how to do it.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I remember 25 years ago when, getting the tech to work was the biggest challenge in the world, but we've come so far.
We come so far. I mean, it's amazing that we're here in 2024, going into 2025, and the things and we can accomplish with technology. The only barriers we have right now and keeps me up at night, Mike, is we need the talent out there that's able to take this stuff and transform it into a business solution. And I think we're missing that piece now. And I think people need to find the training, find the knowledge to be the conduit from the business to the technology to make sure we're using it appropriately.
Yeah. And, it's interesting you say that. Well, there's such a critical shortage of architects now. Architecture now is different than it was 25 years ago. There's a lot of architects that think they're doing architecture, but they're really doing engineering. Their focus is tech. And when you actually take those groups of architects and you give them the business acumen, the executive presence, and those leadership skills, and the ability to really optimize that business, it's interesting to see because their careers take off like a rocket ship. And it's like almost overnight the world sees them because that's the criticality. It's impossible to find an architect out there, someone that actually knows as much about the business as they actually do the technology, and you need both. Without it, you really don't have an effective architect at all.
No, you see a lot of architects that are really engineers. I think that's the biggest problem that you and I have discussed many times. And so, in other words, they have the title of architect, but they do a role of engineering. And there's some confusion out there with semantics, just because people will take a AWS architecture course and come out with engineering skills, and they're AWS governance architect, and we'll focus on just AWS governance products, and the same thing with security systems and things like that. And that's the biggest problem I think we have in the business right now. Architects have to have a much wider view of what technology is and what it can do. And so it's the ability to understand what the business needs and translate that into a configuration of technology types, not specific technology, in a logical sequence that's going to make sense to solve the issues. And that's what's missing. And it's everything technology forward that's hurting productivity now. And I think that the most limiting factor in the generative AI space is not AWS versus Microsoft versus Google. That's not the question you should be asked. That's what everybody talks to me about all the time. It's who has the best AI. It's how you leverage it most effectively and how you assemble the solutions to identify it. And you never lead with technology, but that's what everybody does.
Yeah. Thankfully, I learned that lesson about 24 years ago. I worked at a tech company that had some of the best tech in the entire world. And we constantly competed against Cisco, who had some of the best business people and technology combined in the world. And we used to try and talk about the technology, and Cisco would talk about the business and problems and how it would solve it. Well, I got to tell you, Cisco won every one of those deals, as they should have. And I went to Cisco, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But David, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and sharing your wisdom with our community. If you're looking to become a generative AI architect or a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, please look in the description of this video. We've got free webinars where we will go over the career, talk about what we do, and talk about the things that you need to get hired. We've also got free ebooks in the description of this video, and I hope to see you very soon on another video or one of our free webinars. If you've enjoyed this video discussion, please give it a like, and please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your cloud computing, your enterprise architecture, or your AI architecture careers. David, thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you all on another video.
Thanks.